Welcome to the Migrating to Microlearning webinar. My name is Dan Belhassen. I'm the Microlearning Evangelist with AutoLearn, and we are going to today have a fast-paced session where we're going to walk through microlearning in relation to our AutoLearn platform. A quick note about us, Neovation, we're an R&D company. We're obsessed with unleashing human potential. We basically want organizations to be smarter, and we want their employees to be able to learn faster and retain information better. We have the three different divisions to what we do. We have our SmartU platform, which is our traditional learning management system. We have our Flair Learning division, which does custom course design. And we have our AutoLearn platform, which is our Adaptive Microlearning platform. Now, the reason why that experience set is valuable is because we've been on both sides of traditional e-learning. We have a platform that delivers SCORM courses in the ICC, XAPI courses, and does instructor-led training, etc. So great initial training. We have been developing hundreds of custom courses in SCORM, Storyline, Captivate, and different tools. And we've taken all of those experiences to try to solve some of the problems that remain in online learning, which is how do you handle retention and how do you actually have your learners really learn the material? And that's what brings us to our AutoLearn platform that we're going to talk about today. This presentation is designed to be very practical. It's designed to show you how you would actually approach delivering a microlearning solution that will deliver real results to your organization. Please feel free to ask me questions at any point. You can just throw them in. I'll either answer them at the beginning or when you send them in or later on, depending on where it fits. Microlearning is a huge buzzword in the industry, and everyone's got their own definition. So I'm going to break it down into three different components that I think are really important for an effective microlearning strategy. The first is actually microlearning itself, which is, I think most people agree, breaking down content into its smaller components. Now, we have a particular model for how we do that, but the important part here is breaking the content down into pieces so that those pieces can be distributed independently of each other. The second part is to have adaptive technology. Now, this is the process that personalizes content on a per user basis. And often in e-learning, when people talk about personalized learning, what they mean is that everybody will get a personalized learning plan. So learner A will receive SCORM courses 1, 2, 3. Learner B will receive SCORM courses 2, 6, and 7. We're talking about a much deeper level of personalization where you take all the small bits of content that you've chunked up for microlearning and you can deliver them independently to your learners. And you can do that in an adaptive way. So that's where the subscription learning comes in, which is drip training to your learners, where they're no longer sitting down for a 30-minute or a 45-minute or a 20-minute course. Instead, they're doing 2 to 3 minutes of adaptive microlearning on a day-to-day basis. And as they do that, they will actually learn faster, they'll retain the information longer, and they will actually master your content. So that's the vision. That's what we're trying to achieve, and we're going to demonstrate to you how you can actually achieve this yourself. But the important thing is that it has these three components: microlearning, adaptive training delivery, and subscription learning. Those three things together, that make up the auto-learning experience. So some of you have already seen this, and I'm going to show you quickly what the learner's experience is with AutoLearn. They receive a notification on whatever device that they're using. So it could be a mobile phone, obviously, that most of us have in our pockets, could be a tablet, could be a laptop, desktop, doesn't matter. So it's device agnostic. It'll work with any device that you want. The important thing is your information is retained in here. In this case, I'm looking at sort of a standard employee training set, might contain a number of different topics. On a day-to-day basis, all the learner would do is hit the yellow play button at the top. That's it. And as soon as they do that, they're going to get a set of activities that are designed for them at that moment for exactly what they need to experience. So this might be, they might get one activity which is about employee policy, another activity that's about WMIS, a third policy that's about customer service. It leverages interleaved training in order to be able to deliver across a number of different topics to the learner. Let me show you how that works. So I could do that, or I could drill down into a particular area here. So if I go into online security, and I can choose to practice at any session as well. So learners are able to decide that they want to do extra practice at different sessions. And let me tell you, learners actually do this. And we've been in online learning for a long time, and it's pretty rare to have learners choose to do extra practice, choose to increase their level of mastery, but that's what we see on a day-to-day basis with the AutoLearn platform. Learners choose to engage. When a learner completes the activities, this is the experience. They're going to get an activity. In this case, it's a text question. Could be a video, could be an animated GIF, could be an image, etc. And they're going to do they're going to select an answer. Now, when they do, they're going to be asked to identify their confidence level. And this is very important because it causes the user to have to reflect on their answer. And we are tracking everything that's happening right now. In order to deliver on adaptive training, we need a lot of data. So we analyze how long it takes for somebody to respond, whether they've selected, which answer they've selected, whether it was a correct one or this correct one, whether they change their mind after they get prompted for confidence. We're tracking a number of different data points, and then we're using big data analysis and machine learning in order to determine the likelihood that the learner is actually guessing or the learner actually knows the information. And we use that in order to feed into the adaptive algorithms. So if the learner gets it right, then they're going to get some feedback. They're told they're correct with high confidence, which is good. They're a little bit slower than their peers that have completed this, to give them a little feedback sense. And they're given some written feedback as well. Now, when a learner gets this correct, they're not spending a whole lot of time reading the feedback, which is actually pretty normal, right? Because they knew the answer, they're proficient, but when they get it incorrectly, we can see that people spend more time on the screen. Why? Because now they're reading the information, they're engaging with it. This is text feedback, this could be a video, it could be images. The important thing is that the learner doesn't have to engage with lecture style information until after they do the activity. When they're primed, especially if they get it incorrect, where they're primed to actually want to learn. So what we've done here is we've created a contract with the learner that says, hey, we know you want to do activities first. We know, given the option, you're going to do a quiz first. So go ahead, do your quiz questions, and we'll give you the lecture information if you prove that you don't have proficiency on something, which is really a fair way to interact with your learners. At the end of a particular, what we call a mastery moment, which is a collection of these activities, which is designed to be no more than 3 minutes in length, we're going to give them some feedback. So we're going to tell them that they're moving towards mastery on different topics. We've got 5 levels of mastery, and you can set a mastery goal at any one of those levels, and we'll reinforce for them how they're progressing. And what we see is the learners, this really leverages their intrinsic motivation. They want to demonstrate mastery to themselves. And what's incredible about this is the amount of nudging that you need to do to learners is very, very low, because they actually choose to engage in this. Now, very often when they get to an end of a mastery moment, it's only been 2 to 3 minutes, they can do another one if they wish. Maybe they don't need to, but we see a lot of people doing this extra practice because they just want to increase their mastery themselves. But they can't sit there and cram. They can't just do mastery moment after mastery moment and then reach mastery, because we enforce a number of theories in cognitive science, including spaced repetition, to make sure that they have to prove knowledge over time. So the activities I get tomorrow are going to be completely based on the amount of time that's passed since I've exercised that piece of knowledge in the past, my job requirements, perhaps the season that I'm in, because there might be some seasonal training. All of that will go into the selection of what training I as a learner get. So the adaptive and the microlearning and the subscription learning is what really creates a formula for long-term retention. So let me show you how that works. And we're going to dive into the admin system so you can see the back end of this. But let's say that you've got a standard piece of content that might be what you would traditionally deliver in an hour. So you may have 100, let's say about 50 different nuggets of information. What you would do is you create 3 activities per nugget of knowledge. And that's important because you want to exercise that particular piece of knowledge from a slightly different point of view multiple times, right? Because that is what causes it to really fit in somebody's head and for you to know whether or not they know the material. So let's say that you've created these 150 different activities, which is really standard instructional design, and we'll show you how you would do that. A learner would reach what we call initial mastery by completing a fraction of them. So let's say a third of them. A learner does over time. So this may take them a few days. They complete enough of these activities to reach initial mastery. And now this is already far more activities than somebody would do in a traditional SCORM course. But the learner doesn't feel that. They don't feel like they've sat down for an hour and did a module. They've only been doing a few minutes of training every day, and over time it creates all of these activities, it delivers them to the learner, and then over a longer span of time, automatically all of the activities are exercised by the learner. So imagine this, you've got a SCORM module, it's an hour in length, you maybe have 50 different nuggets of knowledge in there, so around 50, 60 slides a module, and you create a quiz at the end that has 150 questions, which you would never do with a SCORM module. You probably only do 10 questions. So you're only exercising a fraction of them with traditional SCORM, but with AutoLearn, you're going to be able to exercise all of the information from slightly different points of view. And that is the secret to deep encoding. You take what we call a concept, a nugget of information, you create multiple different activities for it, and you require the learner to have to prove proficiency in exercising that knowledge from multiple different points of view. Now, think back to when you were in school and you were learning, multiplication. For instance, you had to multiply, then you had to divide, and you had to learn exponents. And all of these really, the combination of that is really what has helped you understand the relationship of those numbers. Now, it's the same thing with your content. By having multiple different activities for negative knowledge, then you really will work into your learner's head where they will retain the information. So you're not going to need to deliver annual refresher training because throughout the entire year, you're going to have continuous content engagement by your learners. And the flip side of that is you can have continuous content evolution. What that means is that for all of your content, and I'll show you our content studio in a moment, you're going to be able to modify the content anytime you want. So if you want to add knowledge, if you want to remove knowledge, if you want to add different activities, you can do that anytime, and the right information will be delivered to the right learners automatically. You don't have to manage enrollments. You don't have to decide that we are going to do annual refresher training in the fall. All that goes away because the knowledge is delivered automatically and continuously. AutoLearn will raise the level of knowledge to a learner to whatever goal level you set, and then through the year, simply keep them at that level. And this is verifiable, where you can see what the level of knowledge is for your learners, and you can see how often that knowledge is exercised. At the end of the day, it's like a learner is doing a SCORM module maybe 10 times over the course of the year, the same module, but they don't feel that because it's a couple minutes a day, and because it's interleaved with multiple topics, it always feels fresh to them. So let me get into the migration process and actually give you guys a recipe that you can use in order to go from traditional e-learning and start adding retention training with the AutoLearn platform. Now, the first thing is that there's a particular mindset that you need to be in. If you ask your learners, would they rather take a quiz or take a course first? almost all of them are going to say they'd rather take a challenge quiz first. This is good because it means that the learners are starting off by practicing right away. And if they're wrong, that's fine. There's no cost to failure because the adaptive algorithms will simply give them more practice exercise in the area that they don't know in order to build retention. So your focus is actually on instructional design. And the contract that you have with your learners is that you will value their time. Guaranteed, people dread receiving the 1-hour annual refresher training. That goes away. You don't need to do that anymore. Now, traditional e-learning still fits very well for long-form initial training. So an employee onboarding process or when somebody moves to a new job or is learning a brand new skill, long-form training works great for that. But the retention training then becomes continuous instead of something that is periodic. One of the things that we see as a bit of a challenge in designing e-learning projects are making sure that you know what the goals are that you want to achieve. We look at training as marketing, where what you're trying to do is market behavioral change to your learners. To do that, you need to know what the end result is. Traditionally, e-learning, it's been very difficult to know what an ROI is. If you look for articles about ROI in e-learning, there's lots of fuzzy responses. But we think it can be very specific because of the fact that AutoLearn will deliver retention training to your learners. What you can do is you can look at the KPIs you want to change, whatever those are, and you can see real improvements to them on a week-by-week basis. And we encourage you to do that because if you're not actually improving the metrics that you care about, then your entire training effort is kind of wasted, isn't it? So you want to make sure that you set those goals and then are measuring them. And we say, put AutoLearn to the test. If we're not actually delivering improvements on your metrics, cancel your account because it's not worth the money you're spending in. But every single client that we have using AutoLearn has seen an impact, and I think you will as well. The team that you use is a little different than the traditional e-learning team. You still need a project owner, but from our point of view, you need a project owner that's actually obsessed with improving the metrics that you've already outlined. You need what we think of as a learner coach, because one of the things that you're going to find is you're going to get tremendously more feedback from your learners than you've ever gotten in the past. Perhaps you've had a mistake in this score module that you've been delivering for the last 4 years. Nobody's ever pointed it out. As soon as you deliver an AutoLearn version of that, you're going to get 20 people pointing it out. So you want to be able to triage that and work that back into the content to make improvements. So the amount of learner engagement that you get is actually tremendous. The instructional designer is the focus of the project. Graphic design still has a place. You may want to create some purpose-built diagrams or some videos to support as specific performance support, but the key of it is actually instructional design. With traditional score modules, think of storyline or a module like that, the graphic designer is really doing the most of the work. But with AutoLearn, because your focus is on activities, it's the instructional designer that is working and leveraging the great instructional design skills to create great activities that will exercise the knowledge within the learner. But you'll still want a graphic designer for specific purpose-built graphics, which will accent some of your content. Quality assurance becomes even more important. And I mentioned that you're going to get a tremendous amount of feedback, and you will. So you need actually multiple passes of quality assurance because mistakes that maybe have existed in your content forever will get pointed out by your learners, and they will notice them because they're focusing on one activity at a time and they're engaging at a much deeper level. And finally, you need to identify your pilot learners. And this is really important because of the reasons that I've just mentioned. You will spot errors, or your learners will spot errors that you've never known have existed in your content. And so a great model for that is to use pilot learners to get initial feedback and then roll out to larger groups. Now, the next part is where AutoLearn gets quite different, a departure from traditional e-learning, because traditional online learning is built as a linear experience. However, with Auto, it's built more as a knowledge map. So here's some AutoLearn terminology. We call a course, we call a module within AutoLearn, and modules have topics, which are kind of like chapters or sections, and then the topics have concepts. Now, these are the nuggets of knowledge, right? So let's say that you were doing something like you were teaching a sales training course, and one of the aspects of that was selling skills and how to handle client objections. Was an aspect of selling skills. So you may have a module, which is selling skills, a topic, which is handling client objections, and then each objection would be a particular concept. And then each concept would have multiple different activities. So you can see how you can craft activities that will exercise a particular customer objection from multiple different points of view. And that is what's going to drive retention and really understanding within your client base. So let's flip over to the AutoLearn admin system and actually show you guys how that works. So this is our content studio here. This is an online security module that we have. And so I am going to just, so this is the module itself here, and I can collapse that. And this is a topic. So if I expand the topic there, I will see the different concepts. And then I can expand an individual concept in order to see the activities. So I can, let me just zoom out here so you can see how that whole flow would work. So we've got the module on top here, the topic, all the different concepts and the activities. So this is organized as a map, which is really how you organize content within your brain, right? It's all connections to each other. So if I want to modify the module, then I click on the module here, and that changes in the context panel, and I can see all the different concepts within that. I can click on a particular concept, and then I can see the questions within it. And if I click on a particular activity, then I can see that activity here. The question itself, the default feedback for that, and the actual potential answers and distractors. So you, as an instructional designer, are just navigating through the map of your content, which is a really nice way to organize your content, very different from a traditional SCORM or PowerPoint-esque type system where you're designing a linear experience. Because your learner might have a weakness in this particular concept, but they might have a strength in this particular concept. And that's why it's important that your content is really well separated so that our adaptive algorithms will automatically focus on turning those areas of weakness into strengths. Now we'll come back to there in a second. You want to develop effective activities, and if you've got an instructional design background, then you already know what that means. That means crafting activities that will follow best practices and will really resonate with the learner. Now, we have a summary of that at our support site, support@autolearn.com. We've got a lot of different content on here. In fact, all the content that we're going over here, including our frameworks for developing effective activities and effective feedback and QA processes, they're all here. So you can refer back to that at any point. But let me summarize for you what that is, what some of those best practices are. So the first thing is to be concise. You really want to be ruthless, eliminate words that don't have any value. In a traditional course, there's often preamble pages and overview pages and lots of text that the learners typically skip over. Well, you don't need those, so don't use them. You want to use plain language instead. You don't want anything that feels like a trick question, right? You're talking to the learner, you want to exercise their knowledge, you don't want them to have to do unnecessary cognitive work. You want to use media wisely. The challenge with media, as anybody who has done anything with narration knows, is that some people really like narration or media or videos or images. The problem is that you as an instructional designer, you've got to do way more work in order to modify that. So you want to use media wisely. You want to use it for content that's not going to change very often or content that's very high impact. You don't want to use media for everything because it just raises the level of complexity to actually modify the content. You want to absolutely avoid things like double negatives. Unfortunately, some folks that aren't instructional designers, that's a way that they craft activities is by making something a negative in order to be able to get a false or true type response. And it takes a little bit more work, but it's worth it from your learner's point of view to keep activities to them that are very, very clear. And by that same token, you want to avoid ambiguity. So this is the same thing as being concise with your language. You want to make sure that if you're going to be posing a question to your learners, then you're exercising the knowledge. You're not exercising their ability to sort of work their way through a trick question or tricky wording. The distractors that you use, these are the incorrect answers, should be reasonable alternatives. So you don't want to throw gimmies in there, right? You don't want to throw sort of ridiculous responses. Ideally, all of your distractors should be legitimate sounding options. So that your learner really has to do the mental work in order to determine and evaluate which one would be the best answer, the best solution. And lists are fantastic. For anybody who's been on Facebook knows a lot of your newsfeed is going to be 5 this and 7 that. And that's because humans like lists. Lists help us focus. Lists provide us with a model that we can use to consume information. So you can use that in the content. You can use that in the feedback statements so that you can organize the content and make it easy for the learner to digest the information. Now, the activity structure itself is a little different in auto because you might, in a SCORM course, feel that you need to create a slide of information for every piece of content. In auto, what you're doing is you're determining how many activities that you want to create. So let's say we have 2 different concepts. You choose how many activities to create. You may have one concept that has less activities than another concept. So let me show you what that's like. If I go back to the AutoLearn admin here, and I'll just zoom in. So we've got recovering from a successful attack as one concept, and we have preventing phishing in person as another concept. So you can see here, this concept, we have 4 different activities. And this other concept, we have 7 different activities. So this concept, we decided that we wanted to have more activities, that they needed to exercise this bit of knowledge for more different points of view than this particular concept. And that's completely legitimate. So you decide how deeply somebody and how robustly somebody needs to know some information, and then you can design content for that. So let's say that we wanted to make a change to one of these items. I'm just going to open up my preview here so I can see how a learner would see it, and I can make a change to that. So you can make a change to your information, to a question or an answer or a piece of feedback anytime you want. Save it, publish it out, and it'll automatically go out to the learners that need it. And that is what liberates you from enrollments. That's what prevents you from having to track who needs to do what enrollments. Because if you've already said that our employees need online security training and they need it at this level of mastery, then Auto will manage that process. You just need to manage the content. True false is a completely legitimate answer format, but it shouldn't be all your content. With Auto, you can use a mix of different activity types, which we'll show you in a moment. So you shouldn't overuse any one of them. And here's one of the neat things that you can do as well. Because the training is adaptive, your learners have the freedom to fail. If you're doing a SCORM course, whether you admit it or not, there's a lot of pressure to have your learners pass, right? They've just gone through an hour-long SCORM module, and now you're going to give them 10 different multiple choice questions, and you kind of design them to be relatively easy. Unfortunately, that contributes to a lack of retention from traditional e-learning. So now you can use AutoLearn as well as your LMS, but AutoLearn is going to be focused on retention training, so you don't have to give the easy questions. You can actually make them tough, because if they get them wrong for a particular concept, then they'll get another activity from that same concept in their next session or in a session soon afterwards that'll exercise it from a slightly different point of view. And then they'll spend time, they'll read the feedback, and they'll get it right. So you can actually be tough because they don't have to pass. This whole concept of passing and failing goes away, because who cares about that? What you care about is your learners actually learning over time, and that's what we're focused on as well. You want to avoid answer bias. So when you're designing your multiple choice questions, you want to make sure that it's not every time you use all of the above that all of the above is the right answer. And this is all to make sure that your learners don't have an easy path to follow to guess their way through the content. I'm going to show you a number of different types of multiple choice formats that you can set. So we call these activity formats. So you can have your true and false statement, your yes, no, the traditional multiple choice, the fill in the blank style, or a pick list. Now, these are all multiple choice type activities, but you've got 5 different styles here that you can use that you can mix up for the learner. We have a question here from Catherine. The question is, do you have to present the long form piece in every course and then just use AutoLearn for retention? Catherine, that's up to you. So we have some clients that use their LMS to deliver initial training, and then they use AutoLearn to deliver retention training over time. So basically people just do that initial course once ever, and then AutoLearn, continuously after that. However, we have other clients that will deliver their initial training through AutoLearn as well, and they don't even have an LMS, so they just use AutoLearn to deliver initial training and retention training. And the reason why that works is, again, because your learners have the freedom to fail. Even if they do not know anything about the topic, you can actually build scaffolding right within your knowledge map. So if we go back to the map here, and I zoom out. So what we can do is we can design, you can design a knowledge map so that prior to a learner learning about social engineering security, they need to understand safe web browsing. And then say within safe web browsing, you can design a flow here so that perhaps before the learner is asked to learn about public Wi-Fi security, they have to learn about firewalls. So you can design scaffolding within the content, which means that you can start a learner off with basic terminology, you can move them up to practice examples, and then ultimately to complex scenarios, because you can design scaffolding within the actual, within the knowledge map. Now, feedback is actually super important within the auto framework, because the feedback is that lecture material, right? So if I go back to my map here, let me just open up a particular activity. Here's my question, right? Is it okay to answer friends' questions about confidential information? The feedback here is the lecture information. So you are going to, instead of giving them the feedback at the beginning, give them the feedback based on whether they got the answer right or wrong. In this case here, here's my correct answer. And if I want, I can have unique feedback here. And I can also have unique feedback for any one of my incorrect answers, or I can set them to inherit my default feedback. So this is your lecture information. This is where you are going to be speaking directly to the learners. And if they've don't know that material, this is where they're going to learn the information. So you want to be brief, you want to be simple, you want to use plain language, and you want to make sure that you don't introduce new content within the feedback. So don't introduce related information. Focus on that particular nugget of knowledge, and that allows you to develop a very focused why explanation to the learner. Because your learners need to know why. If something's a best practice, why is it a best practice? If they understand why, and if they really internalize that, you're not going to have to keep hitting them over the head with training material, because it becomes part of how they actually will make decisions, which is what drives retention. You want to make sure that you're not ambiguous in your messages as well, right? You've got to be specific. So if you're doing an activity on handling a client's objections, you want to explain why, why is something the best way to handle it? Why would a particular it sounds like a good way of handling the objection, but it's not the best way. Why is that? And that's what you can do. You can zero in, focus on that. Again, media is an issue, so you can have video and images and audio and what have you, but remember, if it's going to change over time, then you're going to have to update that media as well. And one of the greatest benefit of this type of adaptive microlearning is you can modify the content at any point. So you want it to be fast. If you get feedback from the field that we need to handle this other type of client objection, then you can get in there and within minutes, you can have that modified, and that can be rolling out to your salespeople, your trainees, the next day. So you really want to be careful about media that you use. Hope that makes sense so far. Think of your questions and shoot me them, because we're going to get to our questions right away. But I want to talk about a pilot process. We find that this is something that is often overlooked. For people are used to a pattern where they develop a traditional score module. They might have one or two people go through it, and then they roll it out to the entire company. And that might work well in a situation where your learners perhaps aren't paying that much attention to all the content within the module, but within the AutoLearn framework, they will. So you want to make sure to pilot it in a multi-phase approach. We like to just say a group of 10 learners, a cross-section of learners, and you can set the expectations, because everybody who's used to traditional e-learning thinks they're not allowed to get things wrong. But in AutoLearn, it doesn't matter. They can get it wrong. If they don't know it, get it wrong. That's fine. That's not a problem. So you've got to let them know that is not punitive. They just basically do their best, and over time, whatever they don't know, they're going to know. Incentives can work well as well, and these are fun little incentives. What we see is that intrinsic motivation really drives the day on this, but you can always have some incentives, and we've seen gift cards and other things being used for the first people to reach mastery, or everybody who does mastery moments every day are into a draw, that sort of thing. Not really necessary, but kind of a nice little touch. Then what you can do is you can set a process where your learners are asked to reach certain levels of mastery on the topic over time. So by day 1, everybody should be able to get to mastery level 1. By day 3, mastery level 2, etc. Remember, there's spaced repetition here. So if I, as a learner, take longer than somebody else to learn the material, it's going to take me longer to gain mastery of it and to increase my mastery levels. But everybody will increase their mastery over time. So within a pilot group, you really want to get that feedback. So they're going to be spending more than just a couple minutes a day. They're going to simulate doing multiple days within every day in order to be able to provide you with feedback and to go through all the different material. So you want to make sure you have an effective process to gather feedback. So we like the idea of a centralized email account that everybody sends feedback to, so that everybody knows where to actually send feedback, which is important because you will get lots of it. Ultimately, when you do get to the rollout phase after your pilots, then you need to do the same type of expectation management, because again, people are used to not being allowed to fail or it being really painful. I've got to start the score module all over again because I got the quiz at the end wrong. So you want to be able to manage those expectations. And then again, if you have the option to roll out to different groups or different states or different business units. So you can do that super easily in AutoLearn. So if I go back to our admin system here, and if I pick, these are all test users, so I'll pick a test user here. These are all different mastery profiles that we have, which basically map to different jobs. So if I want to say that a particular person needs to learn medical terminology, then that's it. I just click this and I hit save, and that's done. So no enrollments that you need to do. You basically associate what somebody needs to know, and it will automatically start flowing out to them. So very easy to be able to enroll new employees, new learners, and get them in place. As I mentioned, intrinsic motivation is really going to be the strongest thing here, where the learners actually want to learn and they really enjoy the process and they feel that it's fun. But you can do also other incentives as well. It depends on the atmosphere of your organizations, but gift cards and so forth for engagement works well there. But intrinsic motivation is their most important thing. And then what I think of is the absolute best thing that you as an instructional designer is going to enjoy is being able to leverage the feedback of your learners, the analytics and metrics that you get, be able to compare that against your goals, and be able to evolve your content at any point and have that rollout without having to worry about enrollments, without having to worry about a fall training period. You basically modify the content and it'll roll out to your learners immediately to the folks that need it. And that allows you to fill gaps, fill needs that are found from the field very quickly with very little effort, because you're focusing on instructional design. Hopefully that makes sense to you. We are, the AutoLearn platform is still in development. We've got a lot more that we're doing with it, but we are in pilot with a number of different organizations, and we're quite interested in taking in pilots that will help explore AutoLearn from slightly different points of view. So if you're interested in that, definitely reach out to us and we can discuss your needs and see if that's a good fit. We're going to take some questions now. So let's see, a few questions are coming here, and we'll have just a few minutes for questions. But before that, thank you all for attending, and definitely interested in speaking with anybody further that has that would like to learn more about doing a pilot within their own organization. All right, so a question here is employees using their personal devices for corporate training. What is the view on that? Different organizations have different philosophies on that. Some organizations that we work with, they have an expectation that learners will use whatever device they have. We think that it probably isn't something you can mandate. However, what we find is that if you roll it out to your organization and then let your learners know they could use whatever device they want, you end up having them where they use their personal devices anyways, right? Because it's the one in their pocket. It's the one that they have the closest relationship with. So it's the one that they are gonna want to use as long as they can. Now, in some areas, there might be issues about bandwidth and that sort of thing. But what we've seen is that organizations will have a public Wi-Fi or something else set up within their offices or their warehouse or the retail stores, and that's what the learners will be able to use. So you just put that into the policy that they're able to use it themselves, but they need to do it while they're on shift and within the network, and it becomes very, very easy at that point of view, because they really do want to actually use whatever device that they're most comfortable with. So there's another question here. What about certification exams? Can we use AutoLearn to achieve mastery prior to certification? And yeah, actually, AutoLearn is an amazing tool for certification prep because you can really zero in on each different individual concept that ultimately will be in the exam. You can have the learner exercise that from multiple different points of view, and then you tell the learner that they are ready to write the exam when they get to mastery level 4. They get to mastery level 4 on the content, they are ready to write the exam. And what we've seen is exam marks shoot up because this is the ultimate exam prep, right? You're exercising all the content. You're not giving them the exam questions, but you're having them exercise the content. So instead of the learner needing to go and figure out for themselves how much studying that they need to do, AutoLearn will actually tell them when they're ready to write the exam based on the level of knowledge that they have across different areas. And they'll be able to see, maybe there's 10 different topics within a particular exam. They'll see what their mastery level is on a topic by topic basis. So they'll know what they need to spend more time practicing. It's actually a huge delight to do exam prep with AutoLearn. So good question there. All right. There was a question about initial training, which I think that we answered a bit earlier. You have a choice. You can use your LMS for initial training, but we do have clients that are using AutoLearn for initial training and just designing scaffolding within their training material in order to get them a learner from basic material to more complex material. And that actually works super well. So you don't need to use an LMS for initial training, but you definitely can. All right, I think that's the questions that we have right now. Thank you all for attending. Hope this was useful. Hope that we hear from you so that we can talk to you about setting up a pilot within your own organization so that you can start leveraging AutoLearning yourself. Thank you very much.